The following podcast by Fusion Family Wealth, LLC, Fusion, is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the podcast serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Fusion or any other investment professional of your choosing. Please see additional important disclosure at the end of this podcast. A copy of Fusion's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at www.fusionfamilywealth.com.
Welcome to the Crazy Wealthy Podcast with your host, Jonathan Blau. Whether you're just starting out or are an experienced investor, join Jonathan as he seeks to illuminate and demystify the complexities of making consistently rational financial decisions under conditions of uncertainty. He'll chat with professionals from the advice world, entrepreneurs, executives, and more to share fresh perspectives on making sound decisions that maximize your wealth. And now, here's your host.
Okay, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Crazy Wealthy Podcast. I'm excited actually today to have my friend and a mentor to many in the business world of entrepreneurship, Rob Basso. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. And what took so long?
You know what? There were just there were too many options. And I wanted to make sure that by the time you came on, I had some sort of following because you're just too good to waste on the show when we only have 2 or 3 followers, which is my wife and my 2 daughters. So now that we've got my mother-in-law on, I figure now we can have some problem.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, Jonathan.
Thank you, Rob. So you and I, like my guest 2 podcasts ago, Cheryl Penny, have some things in common that are interesting as it relates to the narratives about how we grew up and the narratives that people would normally associate with people like us who succeeded as entrepreneurs and became successful in their own right. In other words, we didn't grow up with a lot on the table to begin with. So I always love those stories because I relate to them selfishly, but I think the audience does too. So I'd love to start by sharing your story. You founded Long Island Advantage Payroll. You made it very successful, competing, I guess, with the likes of ADP successfully, and then brought it all the way to a monetization event, and now your post monetization, I guess, for the last 5 years or so. And living life well. So I'd like to kind of take the audience from your relatively humble beginnings, how you got to where you got, and I guess why don't we start with the story that you and I recounted about start with how you grew up and then take it to the working in the deli story.
Well, I'll give you the short version. The short version is, yeah, I grew up actually outside of Philadelphia and South Jersey, and my parents got divorced when I was very young. And what I'm finding is that's a common story a lot with successful entrepreneurs. And, looking back over those years, I think it's, an early life that you had to be resilient and figure out how to do things on your own. I had a, single mom with 3, teenage boys at one point. And, I had to figure out things for myself. And if I wanted something, I had to go get it. I mean, I remember when they allowed kids to actually have a paper route, I would have a morning route before school. And I knew all my friends were sleeping, and I'd be up at the crack of dawn, throwing the Philadelphia Inquirer, at people's doors. I barely made any money doing that. But, I think even in those early days, things like that taught me, how to be responsible. As simple as it might have seemed to wrap some newspapers, most people were not doing it. And I know that if I wanted something and I wasn't going to get it from my parents, not because they didn't want to, because they couldn't. It was literally that simple. You fast forward, I went to college. I was a history education major. I was going to be a social studies teacher. Jonathan, I could picture, having the little patches on my shoulder, on my elbows and being like, I'm going to go to this classroom. I'm going to change these kids' minds. It didn't work out that way. I mean, I did my student teaching and I really liked it, But there was some deep reflection at that young age. And I was like, could I see myself showing up to this room, this, four corners in this little room for 30 years? And I think the answer was no. And I sought out on my own to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was working in a deli in an office building, and I wrapped my resume in all of the sandwiches that I made that week. And I could still picture them like pushing the mustard aside, being like, what is this? And I saw people picking the paper up and it was cut in half. And they're like, I have no idea what to make of this. But the cool thing is I got 4 or 5 job interviews and I got a job. I got a job working in a home health care organization. And 2 weeks before that job was supposed to start, the woman came down and I was still have my apron on making her sandwiches. And she said, Rob, we had budget cuts. I can't afford to hire you. Oh, like totally dejected. I said no to all those other people because I accepted a job. So there was no option. I was back in the deli again. And the woman came back to me 2 weeks later and says, my husband owns a payroll company. Do you want to interview? Jonathan, I don't even know what a payroll company was. I got paid cash out of the guy's register. And I'm like, I don't care. I need a job. And that's how I got started in my career.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing story. By the way, I just want to, you and I were talking earlier today about you having connection to Bayside, Queens, which, as you know, is where I grew up. Yeah. But the funny part of your newspaper story is similar. I was the same way. My dad, when I was 13, passed away. When I was 11, he was paralyzed. And so my mom was kind of just absentee. So I, like you, it was sink or swim. So you said it interesting. You said, I had to, if I wanted it, I had to do it. But you didn't. You were lucky. We either did it or we sank. We both were able to figure out a way to swim because we were forced to make that choice. And luckily we made the right choice. But I delivered newspapers. It was Newsday instead of what you delivered in Philadelphia.
Oh, that means you slept in the morning because that was in the afternoon, I think, wasn't it? Was that in the afternoon?
I'm not evading the question. I just don't remember. But I remember. What I do remember is I had my cousin's. It was donated to me. His Schwinn 5-speed blue bike with tassels coming out of the handlebars and the banana seat. And I used to take that bike. I put a basket on the front, and I loaded it up with my papers. And then sometimes it wasn't enough room, so I would like figure out a way to split the route into 2. So I go back to get the other half of the papers, and then luckily I was in better shape those days, so I could go back and forth all day long. It didn't bother me. I did the same thing.
I had the basket on the front and one of those sling bags filled with newspapers.
Right. So that's right.
I mean, I think that's the only thing the Philadelphia Inquirer gave you was, here you are, Paperboy, you get a paper bag. By the way, this wasn't like the 50s. I grew up in the 80s. So it's like, this wasn't that long ago. And people think, oh, you delivered, they're thinking of the old newsboy standing on the corner with the little cap. That's not quite
right. It. No, that's no, we weren't that generation. So one of the things I want to talk about to jump off of how you got into the payroll business, I just want to take one step back and talk about your book, The Everyday Entrepreneur, and the what you call applying the triple thread: ambition, confidence, and conviction. And you and I succeeded long before you wrote that book, right? So we didn't know about the triple threat, yet we succeeded. So I'd like you to take us through why you think you succeeded without having the knowledge you're able to impart today as a business coach and someone who wrote the book on this, and what kind of lesson that could teach people beyond what you write in the book, giving people a foundation now that you and I didn't have.
So obviously the book was written after years of reflection of figuring out, how did I do this, and why did I do it, and what motivated me to do it. And when I really look back at the times that, I spent, struggling while I was building the businesses and moving along, I just used the word motivation. And like most people, I didn't always have motivation. Motivation, gives people that, false sense of security. What I really had was determination. I had determination and I had stick-to-itiveness. And I think that most people that try things for a certain period of time, And nowadays, it's like, if it's not done in 6 months, oh my gosh, I give up, I move on to the next thing. Well, I didn't prescribe to that. I took, a lot of years getting good at my craft. And my craft might not have been payroll service. My craft might have been, connecting with other individuals and gaining their trust and having them buy products and services from me, regardless of what those products or services was. But the whole concept of that triple threat, really came about because those are the three adjectives that really any successful entrepreneur needs when growing a business, because you're going to come across significant failures. You're going to have these really low lows. You're going to have these really high highs. And how do you come off those highs, when you have a drop to the bottom in a month or two or even a year? Not every year I was in business was the most spectacular year ever. I've had problems with partners, with vendors, with clients. And you have to be able to get up every morning and say, why am I doing this? What's the purpose behind this? And what's it all for? And for me at the time, it was not just for my family, but it was for, financial success and hopefully to have freedom from having to do anything that I wanted to do. And I figured out how to do that. Nowadays with some of the .com folks would, that seems like they're instant millionaires and they're 22 years old. Let's be realistic. Those are very, very, very few. The rest of us had to figure out over multiple decades how to build something successful. And when it was time to exit, Jonathan, I was nervous. Making a boatload of money and not going and having something to get up to in the morning was daunting. And my friends are like, what are you talking about? You go play golf, you take up pickleball, you figure something out. And that really wasn't me. So I struggled a bit after I monetized my businesses.
But by the way, let's run with that a little bit, because that's relevant to a lot of the audience members, I think, that are listening. One of the things that I've learned as a behavioral specialist is no matter how much money anybody receives from a monetization event, they're all faced with the same emotional roadblock. And that is, for the first time in their life, they might have all this money, but it's also the first time in their life that they're relying on an intangible to provide them with their sustenance, with their standard of living money. And that's very scary. So if someone could have 50 million, 20 million, 100 million, and it is still nervous because of what I just described. So if you can relate how that may have impacted what you were feeling when you got your money and you said, "Hey, I have it," but how did you sense that same roadblock?
Well, I had two exits in 2.5 years. My big company was in 20, and barely 2 years later, I'd built another one and sold that to a separate public company. So I had some history with the bigger one, but the in-between time, there was almost like it didn't happen for 18 months or so, because I was still busy building another business. I went right out of one, right into another, which was probably a mistake mentally, but it gave me something to focus on. But, if you look at the two events, because they were closely aligned, really close enough together to say it was a similar or the same event, afterwards, there wasn't this big sigh of relief, like, oh my gosh, now I can do X, or now I can do this. It was more, dare I say, it was a depression almost. And people that haven't experienced it might not get it. And they might think, oh my gosh, you have all this cash and you don't have to get up in the morning. You can do this. Sometimes when you have choices, it creates anxiety. And that anxiety of having all these choices, literally the world is your oyster type of choices, it doesn't make it any easier. And I know some of your listeners like, that's ridiculous. I would retire. I would do this. Let me tell you, when and if it happens to you, and I hope it does, you will probably feel the same exact way I did, where you're a little lost.
Yeah,
So
they will. By the way, it's the same kind of thing that you see. We default, because of all the choices, to no choice sometimes. So, for example, when people go into their 401k plans as a new employer, and they have all these choices, too many choices, 50 things. What they do is they end up putting it all into money market because they just, and that's what happens in life. When we're faced with all these choices, I'm just going to sleep all day because I don't want to do any of these. I don't want to pick. Now, one of the things that I always take pride in is when I have someone like you who decided to reach out post monetization, and you need to figure out who's going to help you so that you can feel secure with your investments and what you need to do to sustain what I always say, to make sure you don't run out of dollars before you run out of heartbeats. That's the main goal of everything we try to help. But the fact that you and I got to know each other a little bit, and I feel like one of the things I try to do for all the people we help is not to sell them on the idea that we're going to find these great investments, Rob, and you're going to make more than the S&P every year, and you're going to be great, because that has nothing to do with anything. What it all has to do with in helping people is making sure that they can, one, stay with the plan that's going to give them the highest probability of not running out of dollars before heartbeats. But my second, and I think equally important goal, at least in my practice, is doing that for them with as few sleepless nights as possible. And the only way to do that, and I'd like you to comment on it, because now you've been working with us for a few years, is have we succeeded, at least with you, in that second goal? Because that's important to me. Getting you there to me is easy, but getting you there comfortably is what I think we try to do that helps our clients in a way that they're not getting at the Merrill Lynch's and the Goldman Sachs's of the world.
Well, Jonathan, it's a good question. And what I found is having this long-term financial plan was really no different than the plans that I made with my businesses. We had marketing plans, we had operation plans, we had growth plans, we had concepts that we wanted to fulfill. And that took steady, consistent effort, for forward motion. And that's what you've really instilled in me, that it's not entirely different. Meaning, why was I struggling, and why do a lot of people struggle with it, when it's kind of what they've done before? But because it's all new, and it seems like you're creating and getting this income from not doing anything, literally not doing anything. And while that sounds like a dream, it's weird, because to live the life you lived prior, you had to do stuff. You had to. Otherwise, that financial existence did not actually occur. So to receive remuneration without seeming effort, you have to constantly remind yourself you worked the last 25 years to get to this point. So there was solace in understanding that you've done this with other clients. You had a plan for me, which was not dissimilar to the plan that I had for myself running my businesses, but I just didn't see the connection. Right. Now, after a number of years and plenty of phone calls from you at the beginning, meaning when the market dipped 25%, I would be like, oh my God, you just see the percentage of your net worth just like disappear. And you're like, Rob, it's a momentary disappearance, and here's our plan. And you would basically reiterate the things you told me when I first started working with you and your firm. And by the way, it's not just you, Jonathan, it's your firm. Your firm has the same philosophy, and the people that I communicate with your firm have the same philosophy.
Thank you.
So for me, it was that mental understanding of what I was going through and how to get through those dips. And basically, and I think you've noticed even in the last year, I call you less. Now, that doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I've gotten used to the, oh my gosh. And then, especially now, everybody thinks they live in a unique time in history. And with your newsletters and some of my own reading, nothing's that unique. There's a war, there's this, there's famine in Africa, whatever it is, there's going to be these dips, there's going to be these cycles, but any X amount of period of time. And as long as I keep holding on to that, I have a lot less stress in my day. I go about my day and do the things that I do with very little worry that I'm ever going to run out of money.
Right. But that's what I hope to achieve. Right. And with you, I guess it goes fast. I guess we've been working together almost 5 years now. But that's what I try to do with everyone, is spend a lot of time in the beginning using, the actual examples of what we're going through crisis wise. and saying this is temporary, this will pass, and you have to stay focused on the plan. And you do that enough in the beginning years, and then, like you say, then you can go about your life for the next 20 years. And God forbid something happens to me. Hopefully, you've been trained temperamentally that you'll always be able to do that. And that's
Again,
really
but that goal. Point right there, if God forbid something happens to you, which it won't, anytime soon anyway, it's just like, getting a second in command in your business. You hope that you've imparted to them, mentored them and taught them, where if something did happen to me as a leader of a business, or I wanted to work less, that the business would run just as well. And to be quite frank, that's exactly what happened. My last 5 years in business, maybe I worked 10, 12, 15 hours a week in the business. I went off on other investments and had free time and did what I wanted to do because I built the machine and the brain trust within my own organization. While I don't work for you, it's the same concept. You taught me the skills that I needed to have mentally to get myself through situations and not call you 4 times a week.
No, you're right. And there is continuity there for sure. So, Rob, when you, I went to watch you, I guess now it's almost two plus years ago, talk to a group of students at Hofstra. Talk to me about some of the work.
It was Stony Brook.
Stony Brook, right. It was Stony Brook. I was lost. I ended up at Stony Brook. I went to Hofstra initially, but what happened? Tell me about the work that you do in that space with some of the younger generation.
Yeah, well, I think what a lot of universities do really well is they teach the basics. They teach them, especially the business students. They teach them the basics that they need to know, and they're getting much better lately in the last handful of years at giving them real world experience of what it's like to really start a business, to grow a business, to exit from that business. And what my talks usually encompass is my story arc, the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations that happen to an entrepreneur along the way. And what I found was it resonates really well with these young people. I pay attention when I'm giving a talk. I see who's focused, I see who's on their phone. And, the goal as a professional speaker also is to make sure that you have an engaging enough topic and an interesting way to deliver it that people are engaged in paying attention. But for me, it's exciting because of the people that want to talk to me afterwards. And usually I can tell how well interested they are in a topic or discussion by how long the line is to have a conversation with me. And if you've got 60 or 70 kids waiting to talk to you about what you just said, number one, the university probably did a right job of teaching these kids the basics and figuring out, okay, we're bringing these speakers to you for a reason. You should soak up all the information and knowledge. And believe me, I never had all the answers for these young professionals up and coming. I had my viewpoints and the way that it worked for me. It doesn't mean that's the way it'll work for them. Things are changing and constantly changing. And I mean that in the workplace with the advent of AI, just all of the things that were different than when we came up. I mean, Jonathan, I remember when we went to college, there was no computers, there was no internet.
That's
Maybe
right.
you had a Commodore or a word processor, but the internet didn't come about till the end of my college career. I didn't even have a cell phone till a year and a half after I graduated. The young professionals now have a ton more to navigate. And I'll contest it's probably a little harder for them now than it was for us, because it's not just about their own steam and ambitions. It's about being able to juggle the significantly changing environment that we have right now.
100%. And it's funny. I remember in college, Rob, I had WordStar, which was a little floppy disk that I put into the computer. And I was at the time, I was an intern at Lehman Brothers in 1988, and Smith Corona was doing a secondary offering. They were issuing more stock to raise some money. For those who are listening and don't know what a secondary offering might be. And I was in the morning meeting as an intern. I was allowed to go to these morning meetings. So they were presenting this word processor as this, the improved version of it. And this is going to be great. And we're raising money, we're investing. And no one asked questions. There were 30 or 40, what they called stockbrokers those days in the room. Mm-hmm. And I, this little peon intern, I had a question. It was a real question. I wasn't trying to be a wise guy. I said, I'm in college right now, and I couldn't afford one of these. I think it was $350 at the time, one of your word processors. And I'm sure there's a lot of students, most of them are probably similarly situated, where they can't just plop $350 on a word. But I can take a floppy disk called WordPerfect, and put it into the computer that I'm presented with in the library without any charge.
Yep.
Why am I not going to do that? How are you going to overcome that? They didn't really have a good answer, and ultimately they went out of business. So I think I was onto something. But the other thing is, when you talk about what the kids have today, we had COBOL, if you remember. That was like that was the business.
It still exists, believe it or not. There are still legacy companies that run on COBOL. Yep.
It's so funny. So I learned that stuff. But I guess the main point of bringing that up is, you and I lived through all of that, as these kids will live through what they're going to live through, technological change and advancement, except I think for them it's going to be much more rapid, right, than it was for us. But you have to be able to operate successfully in the face of all of these changes. And I think it comes down to what you say. You have to be ambitious, you have to persevere, and you have to have all of those tools always working. And the other stuff just comes and goes, right? But if you have the basics, I think you'll always succeed. But if you don't have the basics and you have only the technology and the advancement, you won't succeed. It's just always been that way. I think it's always going to be that way. I'd like to finish off by asking you if you can come up with something that comes to mind for these two things. One is, what might be, from memory, one of the most challenging experiences you had in business, where you thought maybe it could even become an existential threat to your business, and how you overcame it, and what lessons you learned from it about dealing with threats like that. And then on the flip side, one of the biggest turning points, positive, in business, and what that taught you.
Well, one of the biggest existential threats wasn't existential. It was real. It was a disagreement with my business partner. And to give some background on that, I didn't have a ton of money to start a business when I was 22 and a half years old. When I left the prior payroll company I was working, because I was underpaid and underappreciated. And I literally went back to one of the people I had sold payroll services, and we were friendly and hit it off. And I didn't know a ton of business people. Knocked on his door. He let me in. I showed him a simple Excel spreadsheet and said, would you like to be my business partner? And practically instantly he said yes. And within a week we were signing our partnership agreement on the back of his BMW in Bayside, Queens. And we had a good run for a lot of years until we didn't. And what happened was I was the workhorse, and we all knew the deal at the beginning. He was going to put in some money and some mentorship, and it was a loan. Didn't give me the money. It wasn't really an investment. We each invested $10,000 into the business as starting capital, and the rest he loaned us, which was only $70,000. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but I didn't have it, and I really couldn't function without the funds to be able to start the business. So on my steam and his mentorship in the first few years, we did very, very well. But then eventually, which happens a lot when there's money at stake, he took advantage. He took advantage that...
No pun intended.
Yeah, because the name of my company was Advantage Payroll. That is good one, Jonathan. He took advantage and treated me like the goose that laid the golden egg. And when we were contemplating other partnerships and other things we wanted to do, we were going to create this other entity. And I said, okay, this was many years into the relationship. I said, okay, we'll each put up equal amount. And I said, well, what are you going to do for the company? And he goes, nothing. You're going to do all the work. Just like that. And my attorney and even his attorney said, what the blank are you talking about? And he's like, no, well, I'm not going to do any work. He goes, in fact, you should put up more of the money and I should put up little, but still get 50%. And I was like, what? That was the beginning of the last day of our partnership. Because when you get to a certain point, in your career, you don't need the help that you needed before. And it's not that I was ungrateful. It's just after a non-working partner making over $1 million a year, never working in the business, and then trying to tell me that at a different stage of my life, that it's going to be the same deal I made when I was 22 that I should make when I'm 40 is kind of the definition of insanity. Yeah. So the hardest thing that ever happened was separating from that partner, because we had a real relationship. It wasn't quite father and son, but there was a lot of mutual respect. So breaking up It's like a divorce. I imagine. I've never been through a divorce. And I hope I never do.
Me too.
The simple fact
Because I like Mary Beth Basso,
well,
so I
good,
hope that doesn't
so
happen.
do I. It was so mentally taxing because you have all the emotions and finances, connected with this other individual, that it was the single hardest thing. And also to realize that person that you thought of one way really thought of you as someone who was just a moneymaker for them. And that was really hard. That was very hard to handle. And we didn't talk for many years. And recently we started kind of chatting again. But mostly because he's much older now. And I'd like to think of myself as a decent human being. And, he's not going to live forever. So I don't want to say bygones are bygones, but, we've had some relationships again.
And you survived the split, obviously. You survived the split.
We survived it and did very well with it.
Yeah.
In fact, it unencumbered me to do the things that I always wanted to do and how I wanted to do them in the business 100% on my own. And that's how, by the way, I built another business very successfully in 2 years and exited to another public company because I was unencumbered by a partner that didn't really understand the modern world and what I was trying to do. So that's really the most difficult thing. And what was part 2, Jonathan, now that I got off?
Part 2 is what was one of the key successful moments that might have even been pivotal in your career?
Well, this is an interesting one, and it goes back to the beginning of my career. So when I was investigating opportunities and what I wanted to do after I left the payroll company that I quit after about a year, I didn't know that I wanted to stay in the payroll industry. So I investigated lots of options. And one of them was licensing a piece of software, because building your own software in this industry is very costly, very difficult. And I didn't have the resources to do that. And probably nobody would have trusted me at the time to do it. So I investigated all these different softwares, and I met a gentleman named David McAllister. And for whatever reason, he took a significant shine to me and thought I would be a perfect person to license his software. And I said, you know what? You don't really want to license the software because it's really a job. I didn't want to just work for your company. He helped me convince the CEO of this company to not just work for them, but make a deal that said, if I did X in a certain period of time, he'd let me buy the whole thing back from him. Now, I couldn't believe we were even negotiating such a deal, but I knew that the minute that leader of that company made that deal, that I was going to get that company back and I was going to end up buying it. The moral of this, and by the way, I did, and we totally crushed whatever goals he wanted to put. And that's how I really got started on my own journey in less than 18 months. But the moral of this story is someone took a chance on me on those early stages where he didn't really have a significant vested interest other than helping another person. Yeah, he made a sale and he made me look good, but he did it because he believed that I could do it, and we just connected. He was probably still is, he's 15 years older than me, and we're still friends today. Without that person, I'm not sure that my story would have gone the way. I think it would have gone well, but it wouldn't have gone well in that industry the way that it went without one person taking a chance on me.
Yeah.
So,
and that's not unusual, right? That's why I asked the question. Like you look at Bill Gates happened to go to the one high school in the country that had a computer in those days, right? If he didn't, we wouldn't have Microsoft. I mean, it's just one of those things, right? So there's always that one thing that can change our whole trajectory in a meaningful way, even if we would have still succeeded, for example. I want to end with two things. One is, I want to just, this is a compliment to you because I want to pay it to you. I've really gotten a lot of pleasure out of getting to know you for a lot of reasons. But one of the podcasts I did are the particular challenges that executives and entrepreneurs have as investors. And one of the challenges, they're overconfident because of the success they achieved as entrepreneurs. They think they can relate that same skill set that led them to entrepreneurial success to invest successfully, to perform knee surgery on themselves successfully, whatever it is. They can do everything better if their hand is in it, right? And so that overconfidence bias in investing kills them because it's like a big magnifying glass over all the human nature biases that destroy the rest of us, except they magnify it with the overconfidence and blow up faster and worse with a lot more money. That didn't happen to you because you're humble. You didn't look at your portfolio as, hey, this thing isn't doing well, let's get rid of it, this international, and let me put it into the technology piece, because the international is a bad division of my business, and this is good. You were able to not go down that path, which is, so you're among the minority of entrepreneurs that succeeded that I can actually help, to be candid, because of your humility and because of the fact that you didn't develop that overconfidence. And I think it comes in large part because of how you grew up, but it also shows in that you give back to the community, to the younger generation. You wrote your book. I didn't think you wrote your book to get rich. You wrote your book to share with people what your knowledge was, to help them. So let me segue that into talking. You just close off by talking about your business now of helping people as a coach, and how that works, and how people can find out more about it. And then anything you'd like to say in addition to that about the book, or anything else relating to how you help people.
Well, I've got 3 areas of my consulting practice now. And one of them is direct CEO, president, founder, owner coaching. And what I discovered is that while I believed I was a good leader and led a good company, there wasn't a lot of formalization of how to get somebody from point A to B to C to their specific goal. It happened, but it didn't happen in a codified way. So what do you do when you have a lack of knowledge? If you really want to be good at something, you go back and you get educated. So I took 6 months worth of coursework to learn how to codify the things that I kind of already knew how to do, to walk people through a process, a tried and true and proven process to get what they want out of their life and their business. So that's one piece of it. Another is a direct consulting piece where businesses hire me to help them either through challenging times, to help them grow, or to help them get on a path so they're ready to exit their business when that time comes, because too many people aren't prepared to sell. I was only modestly prepared mentally to sell. And I know that I can bring a lot to the table because of the process that it takes, and also to help people really give them the chance to have the highest multiple exit possible through some key things that most entrepreneurs are unaware of until it's too late, and then they get undervalued. And the last piece to me is also really exciting. So less than 6 months ago, I kind of had this epiphany, but realized, what am I really good at? What have I done well in my career that can easily be adopted by others to help them be successful? And I think it was the branding of myself, the personal branding that I put towards letting the world know my professional skills, the way that I communicate, the importance of certain things in business. So I started a social media company specifically designed for leaders and CEOs and top officials at organizations of any size that are wildly underserved by LinkedIn, meaning they've never used LinkedIn, or they use it, but they post once in a while. It is such a powerful tool. If you are not using LinkedIn to build your personal brand, you're being left behind. And some people believe CEO-led marketing is silly. The company is supposed to be more important than the CEO. While I believe that's true in the long term, if you're a small or medium-sized business owner and you're a leader, you are wildly important to the success of the company. And why not use your most incredible asset, you, and your ability to show people why they would want to work for your company, why they would want to hire your company, why you're better than the competition without actually selling. You position yourself as an expert in your industry, and people will want to know you. And that's what we do. We help them come alive through the power of LinkedIn.
Well, I say I highly endorse Rob. I'm talking to the audience. He's a genuine person. There's nothing to me in life that's more valuable than authenticity. He has it, and I feel I have it. It's one of the reasons we connect. And I think if you need help in any of those areas, you have a wonderful resource in Rob. So reach out to him. And Rob mentioned earlier that what am I going to do when I retire? When he was selling, am I going to play golf? He didn't play golf. He became a pilot. He flies a plane. So I get a little nervous about that. every now and again. But the
Oh,
good news
yeah.
is his plane has a parachute, so that makes me feel a little more comfortable.
Pretty sure you advised me not to do it. Sorry, that's one thing I didn't listen. On that note, it's the most difficult thing I've ever done besides running my businesses. But I will tell you, it took all my brain power and I needed it. It's been a big help to me to keep my brain really sharp. So,
and again, I take comfort in the fact that you have a plane with a parachute. So that keeps me from losing too much sleep at night when you tell me that you're flying from Boca to wherever you're going back home to these days. All right. Well, Rob, thanks again for joining us today. It was really great to have this conversation. And thank you to the audience for tuning in. You can get us on crazywealthypodcast.com. All of the venues that you get your podcasts on typically are also going to be able to be where you can avail Crazy Wealthy. So till next time, Jonathan Blau signing off.
Stay tuned to hear Amy's call-in for the recap of today's episode.
Hi, honey.
Hello, honey. How are you?
Well, we'll be fair to the audience today and let them know that I'm really looking out my window and I see you swimming in the pool. It's July 4th weekend. I know this will probably hit the air a little later than that, but we're in vacation mode.
That's okay, but you're not really being honest because you're looking at the pool, but you're also looking at the ocean.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And I'm looking at such a handsome guy sitting in the pool.
Yeah, well, I don't even know who that is behind me, but
that's the pool guy. That's the pool guy. So I heard you had a phone call this morning.
I had a phone call, yes, with my friend Rob Basso.
Rob, I give a lot of credit to Rob. He's a really impressive guy to me. My favorite story about Rob's, I'm sure he talked about it, was the deli sandwiches.
Oh yeah, that's a great story. Rob has just got a lot of perseverance, self-taught, kind of like me. Not that it's anything ever about me. When I did
right, it's never about you, John.
And he's also very humble, like me.
In terms of humble, there's no one more humble than you. So I can't imagine him being more humble.
I grew up, it was Jonathan R. Blau, and I changed it years ago to Jonathan H. Blau.
Jonathan Humble Blau. The funniest thing about that deli sandwich story is if we told it to any one of our children, or I shouldn't say anyone, but most children of this generation, if you told them that story, they would look at you like you had 9 heads.
Well, there's most stories that you would tell our kids about anything having to do with creativeness and ingenuity as it relates to seeking job opportunities. They look at you like you have 5. In fact, just telling them that you sought job opportunities might have them look at you like you have 5 heads.
It's true. Not this whole generation, but a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, so what were your takeaways from your conversation with Rob?
You know, he's just my takeaways is he's what I thought he always was. You know, just hearing him talk about his stories really fleshed out what I always thought he was, which is, I'm not kidding, someone with a lot of humility, a lot of success, still works as a coach, you know, not because he has to, but he likes to help other people. So he's an entrepreneur coach, helping businesses and business owners learn to, be better at what they do and feel good about what they do. He does these motivational clips on social media. And he's an all-around just good guy. He's married to Mary Beth Basso, who I've gotten to know when you met last year in Florida, who's really, really nice. And
really nice.
Good family man. There's all-around good guy. And he continues to go through life, like enjoying life, but still challenging himself, which is... Well,
sometimes he enjoys life a little too much because he scares me with that airplane.
Yeah, but the one good thing about his piloting is that he has an airplane with a parachute.
All right, that makes me feel very, very safe.
I mean, it makes me feel safe for him. I still wouldn't fly it.
Right. No, and I'm in fairness to the audience, I do know Rob pretty well, so I'm not speaking without having had conversations with him before. I do know that he's also very into mentoring the next generation. And
he's into mentoring the next generation. Yep, he really does. He loves to give back. We talked about his presentation a number of years ago at Stony Brook, which I went to, just to watch him speak. And there really was a lineup of people in the audience, students, to ask him follow-up questions. And his stories are just very relatable. And it makes you feel like if I could do it, you could do it. That's how Rob presents himself. And I love the fact that he has a connection to Bayside, Queens. He also was a paperboy like I was. He delivered the Philadelphia Inquirer, I think, and I delivered Newsday. So anyway, it was a fun and I think enjoyable for the audience who's going to listen to a podcast. And that's it. I'm looking forward to having it air in another week or two.
So what is his biggest piece of advice? Because he's been successful, and obviously you've been very successful. Having talked to him, what was his biggest piece of advice?
I don't know about biggest. I don't know if I call his biggest piece, but what he said that made sense to me, that just is simple but resonates, is everyone expects, if they're going to try something, if it doesn't work in the first month, they're going to try something else. He says how it, spent years perfecting, in his mind, his craft to be able to succeed with it in business, not months. And you have ups and downs every year, or every month isn't a good month. You have to accept that that's going to be the case. Much like I teach my investors to accept that you're going to have temporary declines. The declines come frequently, sometimes deeply, but always temporarily. And you have to learn how to live with that and continue to operate effectively. Same thing with business. That's how Rob is. You're going to have disappointments. You're not going to succeed in a month or two. It could take years. Keep going. And that to me is what I would say in answer to your question.
Now that you say that, that's kind of like marriage also. It's been 30 years and I'm still waiting. Like I'm going to be perseverance, and I'm going to tough it through. I know the good times are coming.
No, marriage to me, it's like karate. I've just built a resistance, right? So nothing hurts me anymore.
And on that note, everyone, I hope you guys had a great 4th and that you're having a great rest of the summer, and we'll speak to you again.
All right. Until next time. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Crazy Wealthy Podcast. For more insights, resources, and to sign up for our newsletter, visit crazywealthypodcast.com. Until then, stay crazy wealthy.
The previous podcast by Fusion Family Wealth, LLC, Fusion, was intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the podcast serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Fusion or any other investment professional of your choosing. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk, and it should not be assumed that future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy, or any non-investment related or planning services, discussion, or content will be profitable, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation. Neither Fusion's investment advisor registration status, nor any amount of prior experience or success should be construed that a certain level of results or satisfaction will be achieved if Fusion is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. Fusion is neither a law firm nor accounting firm, and no portion of its services should be construed as legal or accounting advice. No portion of the video content should be construed by a client or prospective client as a guarantee that he or she will experience a certain level of results if Fusion is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. A copy of Fusion's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at www.fusionfamilywealth.com.